Despite successfully getting it through the House of Representatives, Donald Trump's one big beautiful bill seems to be in serious jeopardy already in the Republican-controlled Senate, with 2 Republican senators openly defying Trump, and one of them gets really, really blunt and kind of brutally humiliates Trump, even on Fox News. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, just as a reminder, Donald Trump's party controls both the House and the Senate. The Senate, they have a 53-47 seat majority. They can only afford to lose 3 Republican senators, because if it goes 50-50, J.D. Vance can break the tie as vice president. If they lose 4 senators, if Trump loses 4 senators, that bill dies. It's done and over with. And right now, he's already lost 2, okay? So we're going to play these clips. We're going to start with Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson, who is usually a pretty reliable MAGA Republican congressman, except he's pretty pissed.
I couldn't care less if he's upset. I'm concerned about my children, my grandchildren, and the fact that we are stealing from them. We are stealing from our children and grandchildren. $37 trillion in debt, and we're going to add to it as Republicans? That is unacceptable. And that's why there's no way I'm going to vote for this bill in its current form.
Did you all hear that? Hear that first part one more time.
I couldn't care less if he's upset.
This Republican senator is saying he couldn't care. I couldn't care less if Donald Trump is upset. Holy shit. The fortitude it takes in today's Republican Party to even say that, man, if Trump sees that clip, he's going to be pissed, because it's not just a Republican expressing some sort of, hesitation or reservation about Trump's big, beautiful bill. Ron Johnson just gave Trump the finger on TV. And then he was interviewed on Fox News. We've got a couple of clips to show here.
Okay, so Senator Ron Johnson, I want to ask you about the one big beautiful bill, as we continue to hear Democrats speak out against it, although it was able to pass in the House. Barack Obama takes it on in a new post on X, saying this: right now, Republicans in Congress are trying to push through a bill that would put millions of Americans at risk of losing their health care. They want to cut federal funding for Medicaid, take away tax credits that help more people afford coverage, and raise costs for working class families. Senator, where do you stand on this, as now the Senate is next?
Well, first of all, understand that President Trump is trying to clean up the mess left behind by Democrats and President Biden. It was President Biden who went on a spending spree after COVID. Listen, during COVID 2020, we had to do something. We had to calm the markets. We had to do something fast. We had to do something massive so that markets wouldn't collapse. But by 2021, we had already flooded the economy with trillions of dollars. We didn't need to add fuel to the flame. And I always use the analogy.
So let's just stop right there for a second. President Obama was right, by the way, in his condemnation and criticism of the one big beautiful bill. But I got to say, it's interesting how Johnson is trying to give Trump some cover here, in the sense that, this is really, the fiscal irresponsibility is on the part of the Democrats. That's just not true. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump spent more in a 4-year term than President Biden did. Donald Trump deficit spent all 4 years he was in office, even before COVID. And that $2 trillion tax cut for the rich, the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was the only signature piece of domestic legislation under Trump, the big part of it, because it's all about tax cuts for the rich, that wasn't paid for. So even if you don't include COVID, Donald Trump added $2 trillion to the national debt, and he promised that he'd wipe out all the debt he'd inherited. So no, I mean, Johnson's trying to sweep his complicity for the national debt under the bus, and the Republican Party's complicity in the national debt, but it's not working. And especially when you look at this current bill, which is part of the reason why he's openly, defying Trump on it, is because it's so fiscally irresponsible. We'll get to that part, though.
There's not an American family, if they had an illness, like we had a pandemic in 2020, that family, and they had to borrow $50,000 to pay for medical bills. If that family member got well, or if the pandemic ended, would keep borrowing $50,000 and keep spending at that level. But that's exactly what President Biden and Democrats did for 4 years. So now our debt and deficit has exploded when it shouldn't have. We should have already returned to a reasonable pre-pandemic level.
Okay.
And now that we're spending more than $7 trillion, it's hard to get back down to that level.
So, but you have said, Senator, that the current bill as passed by the House is unacceptable because of what it does to the debt. So what is this bill going to look like by the time it gets through the Senate?
Well, that I can't predict. Again, I think the House, I sympathize with how difficult this process is. But what I've been suggesting is you have to go line by line through the federal budget. That's going to take time. We're not giving ourselves enough time. We have to focus on the real numbers. All you heard in the House was $1.5 trillion. Sounds like a lot, but it's meager in compared to the $89 trillion we're going to be spending over the next 10 years and the $22 trillion we're going to add to the debt. Their bill, I believe, actually adds to that $22 trillion. Again, that's averaging $2.2 trillion a year deficit. That's completely unacceptable. That's why I'm saying it's inadequate.
Damn. $20 trillion, $80 trillion, $2 trillion a year. Ooh, that's brutal, folks. And that's coming from the Republican Trump-backed budget bill. So much for fiscal responsibility.
Okay, so safe to say that you would not support it in its current form that it passed through the House.
Correct. I think we really have to take a two-step process here to give ourselves the time to go line by line. They're doing it the old-fashioned way, exempt most spending, look at a couple programs, tweak them, have the savings in the out years, have some fake savings. Yeah, there's some good work in there. There's no doubt about it. It's tough, but we need the time and we need presidential leadership to get on board with returning to a reasonable pre-pandemic level spending. That's probably for next year no more than $6.5 trillion. Right now we're on track to be over $7 trillion. That's completely unacceptable.
All right, Senator.
Damn. I mean, you see it on Sandra Smith's face and even John Roberts there, the two Fox News hosts. Like, they're stunned by how blunt and defiant Ron Johnson is.
See how it goes. We hope you have a good Memorial Day.
So that's Ron Johnson. I think we got one more clip of, well, actually, no, this is an article from The Hill about this. So he says, Ron Johnson criticizes House GOP bill, says Trump, quote, can't pressure him like House hardliners. Okay, so again, he's doubling down on this. Senator Ron Johnson on Thursday criticized the House GOP's recent sprawling package to enact Trump's tax priorities and cut spending, while swiping at his colleagues in the lower chamber for setting, quote, the bar way too low, end quote, in their goal to generate savings. Quote, they just kept talking about $1.5 trillion. They set the bar way too low, Johnson told reporters Thursday morning while referring to the minimum amount of savings House Republicans were looking to secure as part of the package. Quote, the goal of the House effort has been to pass one big beautiful bill. It's rhetoric. It's false advertising. The goal should have been to reduce average annual deficit so we have a focus on spending, end quote. He was also asked by reporters about conservative holdouts on the House side who shared similar concerns about the deficit, only to eventually allow the bill to move forward after pressure from Trump. Quote, in the House, Trump can threaten a primary and those guys want to keep their seats. I understand the pressure. Can't pressure me that way. Quote, I ran in 2010 because we were mortgaging our children's future. It's wrong. But we were $14 trillion in debt. Now we're $37 trillion. Have you been watching what the bond markets are doing in relation to the one big beautiful bill? They're not thinking it's a very big beautiful bill. So yeah, Donald Trump apparently cannot pressure this guy. So that's one Republican holdout in the Senate. Well, we have another, Rand Paul. This is what Rand Paul, Republican senator from Kentucky, has to say.
Well, Chris.
Let's refresh the page.
Well, Chris, bad news for Speaker Mike Johnson, who earlier in the day yesterday told us that the Senate is going to pass this with minimal changes. That's not true. And of course, the president still expects this bill to hit his desk before July 4th. That's the holiday that he wants to sign it on. And of course, we have the debt ceiling that is also attached to this bill that many senators don't want to vote for. That includes Senator Rand Paul. I pressed him, Senator Josh Hawley, two that have been opposed to elements of this bill for, quite frankly, different reasons. And that's part of the challenge here. Take a listen.
The Senate's going to want to put its own stamp on this. We'll write our own version of the bill. I talked to the president about this last night, and his instructions were pretty clear. Don't cut Medicaid.
This will be the greatest increase in the debt ceiling ever, and GOP owns this now.
Senator, some of your House colleagues said the same thing, that they're not going to support the bill because it adds too much to the deficit, but then they ended up voting for it. Do you think the president could put pressure on you and others?
I'm not persuadable to go against the principles of conservative government.
Well, there you go.
So, actually, I forgot about the Hawley part. Now, if Hawley, who presents himself as a populist, stays true to his purported principles, he says he won't vote for this bill from Republicans precisely because, again, he gives the game away. He admits it. This Republican bill backed by Trump cuts Medicaid. Any Republican who tells you otherwise is a lying sack of shit, and we can refer them to Josh Hawley. We have the Trump card. They're just lying, and enough Republicans are actually openly admitting this. So let's think about this. You have Ron Johnson publicly saying he won't support the bill. You have Josh Hawley saying he won't support the bill. You have Rand Paul saying he won't support the bill. If they lose one other Republican, this bill is dead. So they might lose Lisa Murkowski, Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins. There's no telling. But right now, this bill by Donald Trump is in serious jeopardy and would be brutally humiliating for him, and also really good for the American people because they don't need to pass a bill into law that strips health insurance from Medicaid from 14 million Americans and blow up the debt and deficit, which is precisely what this would do. So yeah, again, all three of them pretty blunt on this. Josh Hawley, the least of which, Rand Paul second most, and Ron Johnson, of all people, basically giving Trump the finger, stunning Fox News host by saying that Trump can't really do anything about them, and he doesn't care. I couldn't care less. I could not care less that Trump is mad. That is a hell of a thing to say from a Republican senator. And I love to see it. More of it, please. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.